the 6th week of our Uncertain series. That's right. That's right. So I have a question for you guys as we get started this evening. How many of you were a Y kid? I don't mean, to clarify, I don't mean like YMCA. No. I do mean WHY. Why? The question. How many of you were a Y kid? You know, those kids that just are always asking why. And I think in one sense, right, they ask why because, like, it's a new experience. They're curious about the world. They're young. They have no idea. Why? I think sometimes kids ask why, and I can say this because I was a Y kid, because they don't know when to stop talking. Yeah. Exactly. And no matter how old you are in this room tonight, I believe at heart, all of us are still Y kids. And some why questions are easy to ask and easy to answer, like why is the sky blue, right? You can look that up on Google. You can ask Siri, why do I have to learn math? You might not get a good answer, but you'll get an answer. But some questions are a lot harder to get a good answer to. When we ask questions like, why did me or why did my friends have to move away? Why did my parents get separated or divorced? Or maybe even, why did I have to lose that person I cared about so much? You can't Google questions like that. You can't get a solid answer when you ask Siri, why am I going through this really painful thing right now? But when we ask why, I think we do it in a hope to understand something greater, to understand what's happening around us. And in the last few weeks, we've been talking about, right, faith and doubts, and these doubts that we have. And I believe our doubts come at us as why questions sometimes. We start with these big questions that we can't answer, and it just tumbles into more and more doubt. So as we go into tonight, I'm going to tell you guys 3 stories. These stories are all different. They happen at different times throughout history, happen to different people, but all these stories have something in common. Every story has someone or a family going to the Lord in prayer asking why, bringing their doubts to the Lord in prayer. So before we get into those stories, I think we need to define prayer. We need to understand what prayer is, because that word, I think, can be kind of daunting. We feel like we need to have the perfect words to say if we're going to pray in small group or pray in front of our friends, or maybe even pray alone. But I'm here to tell you that is not the case tonight. You see, because prayer is brutal honesty with God. It's vulnerability. It's when our deepest desires, our dreams, our fears, and even our hopes leave our mouth and go to God. It's when we talk to God with the edit button off, no holding back, and we feel safe and heard and loved. But most importantly, prayer is relational. Prayer is talking and listening to God. So a long time ago, there was this family. A son and a dad. I don't know too much about this family, but I know the son was really, really sick. He was really sick. Some people said that he would have seizures. Some people said that it was an evil spirit that was in his body. But what I do know is that this son being sick, it broke his dad's heart. Because all he wanted was for his son to be whole, for his son to be healed. And so when this is happening, the father tries everything he can, right, to help his son in any way. And the father found out about this group of men. And they were followers of this guy named Jesus. And he thought, if I go to this group of men, if I go to these people, they should help my son. They should be able to heal him. So he brought his son, and the men tried everything they could. But they couldn't heal the son. And the father was crushed. He was devastated. And slowly, as he's sitting there and his son isn't healed, more and more doubts start to creep into his head and into his heart. But then Jesus comes along. And Jesus was known for healing, for his powers, for being filled with the Spirit. He was able to heal people. And so they brought the boy to Jesus. But when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a violent convulsion, and he fell onto the ground, withering and foaming at the mouth. "How long has this happened?" Jesus asked the boy's father, and he replied, "Since he was a little boy. The spirit often throws him into a fire or into water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us and help us, if you can." The father said, "If you can." 3 little words, tiny words, all one syllable. But there's so much power and so much meaning behind those 3 words. See, when the father says that, he was admitting that he had these doubts. He wasn't sure if Jesus could heal his son or not. And Jesus responds by saying, "What do you mean, if I can? Anything is possible if a person believes." The father instantly cried out, "I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief." I do believe, but help my unbelief. The father does something really bold, really hard in this story. He admits to Jesus right there, face to face with Jesus. He admits that he believes, but at the same time, he also has this unbelief, and he can't shake it. The father can't shake this unbelief. He's stuck in it. He's scared. And how many of us have been in that position? How many of us have been sitting there, scared, probably asking questions, probably asking doubts, asking our whys to the Lord? And we aren't sure what to do. Almost like you're paralyzed, right? I think a lot of us have been there. If we're honest, a lot of us have been there. You know God's good. You know what he says is true. But at the same time, you're left and you're just like, if God's so good, then why is this happening? And I think that father was there. He's like, I know God's good, but my son is so sick. But what that father does, I think, takes a lot of strength. He goes to the one Savior. He goes to Jesus, and he says, I believe, but I have unbelief in my heart. And we can do that same thing when we go to God in prayer. And it can be as simple as journaling or sitting in silence with the Lord. Because when it comes to doubt, prayer is going to Jesus and telling him, hey, I believe, but I'm struggling with feeling alone. I'm struggling with some friendships right now. I'm struggling with my family, and my parents are fighting, and I don't know what to do. And I need your help. Because that's what the Father does. We learn here that we can always take our doubts to the Lord. Now there's another family. This family wasn't the richest by any means or the wealthiest. They weren't the smartest. But they went to church each week. Right? They were dedicated to the church. They served. Their kids attended a youth group very similar to this one. The family had faith. Maybe that sounds like your family a little bit. You're active in the church. Your life's going okay. But one day, the family's life completely changed. You see, the older brother went to work, and he got in a terrible accident. He got rushed to the hospital, and his family was there, and they waited and prayed and pleaded to God that everything would be okay. They knew God was the healer. They knew God as protector. They knew the stories in the Bible that talks about all this healing that's happened. They knew God. But a few hours later, the older brother passed away. The family was crushed. The entire family sat there asking why. Why did this happen? If we prayed about it, why didn't God heal him? They were trying to understand their life circumstances, what was happening, but all they could make out was the question why. And soon enough, when the family didn't really have any answers, they weren't sure why this had happened, it led to doubt. And it led to some scary doubts. Doubts if God could really heal people. Doubts if God was the protector. Doubts if God was good. Doubts if God was even real. And this doubt ate away at so much of the family. Many stopped following God. Many still wrestle with why this happened. I personally still wrestle as to why this happened to my family. I was 16 when we lost my older brother, junior in high school. And I was left with so many doubts. I was left with so many questions as to why this could have happened. And I look back now and I see that it was part of my journey. And I had to take the doubts that I had and I had to wrestle with them. But you can't wrestle alone. Wrestling takes two. And I had to wrestle with God about these questions, and I brought them to God in prayer. I was honest. Even when I questioned if God was even real, if God was even good, I brought my scariest doubts to the Lord. And I said, I'm struggling with this. I know I should believe. I know what's true. But there's this unbelief I can't shake. I might not understand why, but I know God was listening, and I know he cares about me so much. Because God isn't scared of our scariest doubts. And tonight, I encourage you, from someone who has been in this place of doubt, to not ignore it, to not fight from it or run from it, but bring it to God. And be willing to wrestle with it, be willing to question. Because God loves you more than the scariest doubts that you have, more than the biggest questions you could ask. And so before we go to small group tonight, I have one last story for you guys. It's about this guy named David. He was a shepherd. I like to think of him as a farmer. And one day he got told he was going to be king. Which I think is really cool, but I think at the same time, David was probably really, really scared because he was a shepherd. He worked in the fields. He did not work with people that often. And then he gets told he's going to rule a whole nation. There's a lot of cool things that come with that, but there is a lot of stress, a lot of questions you probably never thought you would have to answer, like, when do I go to war? How do I deal with this? When am I supposed to fight? When am I supposed to run? And I believe David came to these moments of asking why and doubting as well. David had moments in his life when he went to the Lord to mourn and to grieve about all these things that were happening because he wasn't sure where else to turn. And in fact, we get to read some of those personal thoughts that David had in this book of the Bible called Psalms. So we're going to read Psalms 13 tonight to end. O Lord, how long will you forget me? Forever? How long must I struggle with anguish in my soul, with sorrow in my heart? Every day? How long will my enemies have the upper hand? Turn and answer me, O Lord, my God. Restore the sparkle to my eyes, or I will die. Don't let my enemies gloat, saying, we have defeated him. Don't let them rejoice at my downfall, but I trust in your unfailing love. I will rejoice because you have rescued me. I will sing to the Lord because he is good to me. David had brutal honesty with God. He didn't hide anything. David had some really big questions in there too. How long will you forget me? How long must I struggle? When we mourn and grieve, when we ask why, the truth is God's love is unfailing. And I know that sounds cliche, but it's the truth. Because in the toughest of circumstances, when you feel like there is no one left to turn to, when you ask Google these big questions, when you ask your friends these big questions, when you ask your parents these big questions, sometimes they don't have that perfect answer that you need, but I promise you, God has his perfect love waiting for you. And in verse 5, David says, through everything I've been through everything I'm going through, I trust in your unfailing love. And so tonight I want to encourage us to stop acting like we might have it all together so that we can see that God's unfailing love is there throughout our doubts. And when we go to God in prayer, I want to encourage you to be honest with your doubt. Be honest with the scariest doubts. Because even your scariest, most messy doubt you could possibly have, God's not scared of it. And he's waiting for you to share it with him. And no matter the circumstance, I promise, God would love to walk with you through whatever doubts you have, because God's love for you is unfailing. So remember his unfailing love. I'm going to dismiss you guys for small groups now.